The other two can be somewhat confusing because they sound so much alike, the graduated commission and the multiple tiered commission. So I tried to do this little example and hope that it is helpful for you to see the difference between the two. So the graduated commission, all right, is you get an increased percentage of the sales price as the volume increases. So here you can see if you sell 1 to 100 units, you're going to get 5% for that 1 to 100 units. And that's going to be true no matter how many units you sell. For those first 100 units, this is how much you're going to get. But for the next 100 to 500 units, 101 to 500 units, those next 400 units, you would make 8%. And again, regardless of how much you sell, the 101 to 500, you're going to get 8%. Then, if you sell greater than 500 units, okay, that's where you get that 12% for everything above 500. And so here's the math. 100 units times $10 is we're just going to say that's the unit cost or unit price, times 5%, $50. So if you sell 500 units here, you're going to get that same 50% for the first 100 units. And then for the next 400 units, the 101 to 500 at the 8%, okay, so it's the 50 plus all of this, you get $370. Here we have 1,000 units. So now we've gone way beyond 500 units. It's this $370 because it's the 50 for the first 100 and this amount for the second, for the 100 to 500. But for 500 units, from 501 to 500, 12%, now your pay is $970, okay? The multiple tiered just says if you only sell 100 or fewer units, you're going to get 5%. But if you sell 500 units, you're getting 8% on all 500 units. If you sell greater than 500 units, you get 12% on all every single unit from 1 all the way up to your 1,000 units. Okay, and then here's the math on that. So when do we like to use commission only? So that is really good if the salesperson has substantial influence over the whole process. They are the order taker. They're the ones that are responsible for the whole thing. Okay. So that's when it's really very important to have that commission only. Then it's also if there isn't any big ramp up time, any big training that needs to happen. People will understand how to sell this product pretty easily and how that works. And that also means that it's probably a fairly short sales cycle. So they're able to ramp up quickly, get those sales underway. Commission plans aren't always the best tactic. The ethical concerns that I have down here can create that competitive environment that we've been talking about before, or where people would hoard information, keep things. There's gamesmanship that can happen. You also have the potential to really cause a huge amount of anxiety. Not everybody has the ability to appreciate that level of risk in their compensation. In fact, I think the younger generation is even more risk averse than some of the other generations that we've had. And if the sales targets aren't realistically set, then that can be demotivational. So you just have to be really careful with these types of incentive programs. Or you remember my favorite, which was the Green Giant peas, right? That there was that incentive. People brought bugs in. You also had all of this Wells Fargo stuff that continues to go on. Okay, so competitive strategy. What types of sales incentive plans fit best with differentiation? So if you're a differentiator, you probably have more of a customer focus. And so it would probably make more sense to have some form of a salary component to that, because you want to make sure that they're getting exactly what they want. That's the differentiation, that there's good customer service associated with that. Following up, things that aren't totally sales related, right? Training after the sale, things like that. Low cost strategy, on the other hand, is more of the commission. So it is the compensation is variable. So for the organization, that means, again, if this person isn't performing well, then I don't have to pay them. But if they're performing really well, then that's great for the organization, and I'm happy to pay them that money. All right, so that was all of our sales compensation. Now we're going to move on to person focused. So remember we were talking before about person focused. Those are the skills, pay for knowledge, pay for skills types of programs. And the book does a good job of covering that, so I'm not going to do a whole lot, but I want to introduce you to a concept called holacracy. And Zappos, who is owned by Amazon, adopted this probably 6 years ago, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, and it's very fascinating to me. So they've totally done away with true hierarchy within that organizational structure, and instead they've gone to this holacracy, which is much more fluid and supposedly just focused on those things that need to happen at the moment. So you can see here, right, you have one big circle, which is the organization, and then lots of other subcircles and different roles. So the subcircles might be things like marketing, or they've got their example here as the super circle. So I guess there's a super circle here. So it could be marketing, a marketing function. And we know that that needs to happen, but how does it need to happen? And what is it going to look like? So then there are these sub-circles. So maybe digital, maybe something else here. And then the role. So the role is not a person, it is a role. And that is tasks. It's all task focused. And the task is associated directly with your subcircle or your area. So that means there weren't really managers of people. They're managers of projects, and those were team leads. And those can move into various ways. And in fact, you might be, 50% project A, 30% project B, 20% kind of unemployed. So those allocations, and then they move. So your role may change from month to month. Well, you can tell right now there is no job description. Okay, so one of their challenges was, how do you pay people for participating in these different roles, and is it going to vary based on their skill sets or what they're doing? So under holacracy, they came up with what is called badging. So here under this badging, people get paid based on what they do. So again, it's person focused. But look at all these different roles. So here's a role under HR would be this badge librarian, or under what I would call HR. They would not call it that. Then you have to be able to define what these badges are. People can earn badges or they can lose badges based on their skill sets or what they're doing. And then you have to have a compensation architect. So then you have to figure out how much are you going to pay for these different badges? How much value do these different badges, these skill sets, have to the organization at any point in time? Then there is a guardian, there's badge valuation. How are you going to administer this compensation? Because again, it can change over time. You can have some, you can both add and lose badges. So what's going to happen with that? And they're trying to be transparent, but to me it was very complex. So you've got to make these types of decisions. Who's going to decide on what badges are there and what is the value of those? Based on what criteria? If anybody ever leaves that organization, what do they put on their resume? How is their external equity? When we're talking about equity theory, I know how much I'm getting paid, but for a similar role, well, there is no similar role outside. So how would you know what that is? And then how often are you supposed to recertify in order to establish compensation for this one individual? Do we give people training? As we talked about before, if you have person-focused pay, training is critically important. You have to have people who have the ability to go get trained. You have to give them the time to go get trained and not penalize them for that. Who's going to pay for that? Who decides when you get trained? You know, what does a performance appraisal look like? So I'm guessing it has to be within each subcircle that you're going to have a performance appraisal. How do you know if you're being discriminated against or not based on something other than your skill sets? So there's just a lot that goes on here, and so I'm fascinated by it. And I think that as they've learned and grown, that they've had to make some adjustments to what they're doing. But, you know, is the hierarchy the way of the future? I don't know. So it's just an interesting concept. Then we have traditional pay grades, which are smaller here, right? We've got our job evaluation points. This is our pay structure. Job evaluation points, pay, small grades, small ranges, versus broad banding. Broad banding is just that. Again, we're very simple people, we HR folks. So you have broad grades and larger pay ranges. So what we have here is a traditional pay structure where you have a traditional hierarchy, you have the people within that hierarchy. I know exactly what's going to happen when I get promoted. Here's where I'm going, right? Here, there is less hierarchy and less bureaucracy. Managers have greater flexibility in how much money they're going to pay within the range. So that all sounds good, right? Less social distance, as we're social distancing. I'm pretty sure that's not really the right term for it, but the culture will be more open, more collegial. You'll learn more skills, do more cross-training. You know, all that sounds great. But again, you need to make sure if you're going to go with broad banding that your managers actually know what they're doing, because what happens is managers want to give their people more money. So if you give them more latitude, they're going to give their people more money, which can actually break that budget, that compensation budget that we were talking about earlier. So it can be problematic if your managers don't really understand how it all works and how it's supposed to function within the larger organizational structure and the compensation budget. Okay. And then the last thing here is the two-tier pay structure. It's usually in like a unionized setting. And so those people who have been there a while are at one pay structure, but if the economy goes bad and you need to hire more people in, but you can't afford to hire them in at the same rate that your current employees are, then you negotiate with the union and you have a lower rate for any new people that come in. So that's your two tiers. And back in September, if you guys remember, GM workers were going on strike, and one of the biggest things that they wanted was to do away with the two-tiered system that had come about the last time that things had been bad and the union made concessions. So you have these temporary workers who are making less money, less benefits, but doing the same job, and that was inequitable, and they wanted to fix that. Okay, I think that's it for Chapter 8, guys. You did a great job. Thanks so much. Bye.